We just entered into the big park area now, where we left it to go down that to see the Arc de Triomphe. And so now we'll just wander about looking at what looks interesting. A mix of industrial and playful. This may be Joan Miro's work. I don't know. I don't know whose work it is, but this is a homage to the exposition, Universal Expedition of 1888. Pathway is nice for walking, actually, when it's not muddy. This whole area, I don't know what it was initially for, but it's been nicely converted to both a picnic area as well as a little place for kids to play. Nice use of this. A nice feeling of openness, and yet there are places where you can go be in the shade. Feature, whatever it is. Wait till we get up close and personal with those horses up on top. And off to the left, a 19th century bandstand. And there are Castle of the Three Dragons. Let's go in tighter. Very pretty. The four horses are iconic all over Europe, at least, and of course in China. Terracotta Army had, I believe, a chariot with four horses. This guy got a heck of a bubble. It's the first time I've seen it last almost a minute now. There we go. Every park should have one. Don't know how far this water feature goes, but there's lots of boats for going. I wonder if I have any rights to their using my body as a model for their sculptures. Probably not. Some sections of parks seem like they're just used because they had to do something with the space, but they haven't quite figured out what it is that they're supposed to be doing with it. One time it had a real elegant purpose, and now it's just a remnant of its old self, kept somewhat alive. So down at that end of this big park is the Barcelona Zoo. Now we're looking back up to where we first came in. On the upper left above the trees you can see it, and then way down there the Arc de Triomphe. There's a circle of these pretty trees that we've seen before. I would call them larches, I think, that have the bark that flake off. But it's nice to see sometime in the past somebody had the vision of planting these and creating this circular little square, if you will, with the white pelican. And the white pelican is a symbol, I believe, of self-sacrifice, in that its mythology includes it sacrificing itself. The mother is sacrificing herself for her young. And this pretty building, either a arboretum, or however you pronounce that, for plants or for birds. I saw some pretty birds fly by. Now notice this parrot is tagged for some reason. Notice how much this seems to remind me, at least, of a combination of maybe Art Deco, but I don't really think so. More of the Romanesque church-like idea, and yet the feeling is very much like the 19th century marketplaces that you see, which would put it at an Art Nouveau, Art Deco design. These nice curves are certainly the Art Deco, Art Nouveau genre. I'm not much into for these kind of places, but They're neat, particularly if you happen to know what the plants are. I don't. I remember one place I went to that was like this. It was in China, and it was a butterfly place, for lack of a better term. And all throughout, as you walked around, all these different butterflies were flying around. Beautiful. This is either a school of geology or mineralogy or a museum for, but here on display are various kinds of marble and stone, basalt, calacara, famous marbles that have been used, I thought, in Rome, alabaster, basalt. Here's an interesting view of that building we looked at earlier that looked like a two-part greenhouse with that pretty enclosure that's not used, and then the tower of the Castle of the Three Dragons in the background. And if I've never seen a volcanic bomb, and I'm not sure I have, although I'm sure I have but didn't know I did, certainly the telltale flowing lines of lava. It's a pretty building, but not much use seems to be made of it. Pretty even in its unkempt form. Thought I ought to get some detail of these plaques. Not sure that I can tell anything from here. But it's a different approach to decorating a building. I haven't seen it before. Nice way to make a brick building come alive. Okay, we're back at the Elborn CC, whatever that is. I think it's the a market that was closed. It's a beautiful example of what you might see in the 19th century. Look at the date up there, 1870. In this beautiful space, and we'll take a look at it first. Imagine this if it were a public market, which it's not, but if it were, with 2 floors, it'd be magnificent. It looks like a new building, and maybe it is. But what we're really looking at, apparently, are the foundational remains of what the city was like during the 1700s, during the War of Succession. At least this plaque beneath me refers to the succession, and it explains it a bit in English. What else this stands for, I haven't a clue, but we'll take a look at it, and if I have interest in the future, I can always research this, I suppose, using the video as a source of observation, as though I were visiting it at the time I'm doing the research. Well, we certainly see a well there. Don't know what that pipe would be for. There, drainage for sewer, probably, like the Romans used. That area up there is more of the ruins. Behind me is, so we'll take a look at all of this, starting with this area down here. So this is an archaeological site, obviously, but in one of its benefits, there are society levels on top of levels. So beneath this are even more levels, but I can't get a grip on what exactly this is and why it's significant, other than it represents a prior time in the history of the city. The second thing is that apparently there are a great deal of remaining records of this area to provide archaeologists uniquely with great detail to support and to embellish and expand what it is they discover from an archaeological standpoint. If this sounds like BS, it is, because I haven't a clue what this site's for. To add some skimpy more detail, between the period of 1694 and 1714, that period of succession, this was the site of the earlier market And this may well have been the original building. I can't get a clear sense of it. It seems to suggest in the literature that I saw that it is, that the space was that. So we're looking at simply Barcelona history from an archaeological viewpoint. So here we have La Casa de la Nu. So apparently this was a house right in through here that we're focused on. So these were ice houses. So when they say houses, they don't necessarily mean like we would literally interpret that as residence, but rather buildings. And this was in 1640 and 1690 that these were ice houses, indicating ice was indispensable for medical, for food, for cooling wine, refreshing drinks. And apparently the ice came from this place called Castellar-el-Coll or whatever, and Montseny, and transported here in the back of mules, and then it was protected by layers of esparto grass, and then sold about the city in ice storms. Okay, and here you can see the section we're looking at. Notice these two parallel streets that go from lower middle to upper left. Street there, and probably that street over there, and then up there somewhere is another street, a cross street. Now again, imagine when the technology that enables virtual reality comes to full fruition. I will be able to look at this in full use. In other words, when it is in fact being used by people. That's what I'll appear to think, my brain will think it's seeing. And this will be the basis for reconstructing that virtual reality. Looking down into this well, I wonder what that hole is for. Must have brought water into that or drained it out. Now here are drawings of what is perceived to be extracted from this archaeological study. And a good example of what I'm talking about for the future is this drawing of a reweighing house of the market of El Born. In other words, probably an idea of how it might have looked. And from this, you can imagine that any halfway decent animator can construct an extremely lifelike version of same and expand that out to include the entire community. Now people it as you would in an animation movie, and you've got the virtual reality I'm talking about. Now it's up to the skill and the enthusiasm of that teacher or guide to somehow translate this ratty looking rock, this half destroyed whatever it is, into something that's alive and vibrant. Virtual reality will make her job extremely easier and excite and ignite the enthusiasm of those young minds. This is a picture of how the market in Del Born would look like before this new market building that we're in. So let's see if we can't do a burns and get down closer into this and see what we're looking at. Maybe it was just a plaza with these shops around it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, the engineer was assisting construction of making some decoration. So like I can no decoration. No, assisting construction of making some decoration. So like I can no decoration.
Dwell for a few moments on the intricacy of this metal lattice work, if you will. Here a painting of the original fish market that was incorporated into the new El Born market when it was built in the 1800s. This is 1775. So notice, this is what you would have seen a year before our Constitution. Here on the right-hand side, I have a drawing of a structure for distilling brandy. And here we have the archaeological remains of that brandy distilling installation device in the Basador house, which presumably is one of these houses in front of us. But imagine if that detail there is a drain into, for example, that little water channel there. Here's what this space would have looked like again in 1775. It was an open plaza or market with stalls all around it. Notice the scales for weighing out whatever it is that they're selling there. Fish maybe, eh? Looks like it. Don't know what that red stuff is. Look at the clothing they wear now. It's one of the values of these kind of paintings is that it can tell you what people wore as normal clothing. Now here down at the far right of the market, let's go in a little bit closer. Don't know what that is. Some kind of shellfish or something. Just some detail for the fun of looking at it. There another drain. And over here, what were these three little cubicle areas for? Or did they just form the support for a bench? And that little raised area, was there a stove or something there that gave greater insulation? Why would you need insulation on it? And what were these little pool-like enclosures with little stairs on them? Could that have been where you bathed? You sat on those little rock benches? They're small, but maybe enough. Here we see wells, and there water, little trenches or sewer lines, for lack of a better term. There, an entrance into a small little room. Everywhere we see those little round wells. Why are wells round? Notice the double wall. Was that just a double wall, or did it actually serve a function? See, we have the same over here. The defeat in 1714 by the Bourbons signaled the beginning of a tremendous suppression by the Bourbons of the Catalans, who had lost, including the execution of many and the exile of many. Another picture of the fish market. In addition to other Bourbon atrocities, Philip V decided to demolish 17% in essence of the homes and businesses of the area and build a giant citadel. This is the outline of it. Now we're down in this area. This apparently was a stream or river that flowed through this part of the city. Again, notice that well over there. Notice how these spaces are divided into irregular shapes and sizes. Look at that. And over here I noticed a curious feature. What is that? Was it a stove venting out to the right? Notice what looks like a well cover. Is that original? And these two depressions, and in particular that bowl-shaped one there, this mural is entitled The Chocolate Party 1718. That's after the war. Let's look at some of the detail. Looks like dancing. Musicians. Here, one of our community fountains. Notice the fans, the dresses, the hair pieces, the hairstyles. Here a man serving some chocolate, hopefully. Ah, here they are preparing it. Dinner is served. Could these have been real people used as models? Apparently the balconies that we see today were an innovation of the 1700 era. Again, notice this appears to be basin-like rather than a well. So was it for a stove or hearth? And here a water channel. These drawings illustrating games like tennis, for sure. Here's some kind of croquette, it looks like. And here's some kind of billiards, it looks like. Now, playing archaeologist for a few moments, what are those parallel lines of little indentations? What were they caused by? What did they represent? And notice there, that goes down into the depression, so maybe these are just little pockmarks made by the archaeologists for some research reason. And notice in the walls, these holes, my guess is that they would have been for some poles or something that would offer some vertical support. Just a guess. But what would such a little space like that be for? And there again, a couple of our little indentations. Several, in fact. One there, and one way over there. Imagine life on this street, just like life we saw on the streets today. People going back and forth, doing what human beings do in a society to live, to do their day. The street we just looked at is known for its high concentration of the makers of strings for guitars and violas, which they produce from the guts of rams, wethers, ewes, and lambs. This print depicts the assault of the Bourbon troops on Barcelona. $40,000 against a quarter of that. You can imagine the horror has usually accompanied any defeat of a siege on the inhabitants. Looks like an oven. Now here we're looking at something interesting, a well, of course. Here this well with a flat edge Notice what that is. Any idea? Of course you do. With the sloping rocks, that's a wash basin for clothing, for washing clothes, as we've seen in various fountains in various cities. Notice that very carefully worked stone. What is it for? What is this for? Is that a little basin and those are a couple of drains, and that somehow the water drains down into one of these cavities here or flows out through there? What that was is a canal, not a river, but a canal for getting rid of the water, wastewater, that flowed into the city from wherever they got it. And notice here that ark. What was the purpose of that? No idea what these are for, just interesting. I've seen this before, so this must have been some part I was wandering in today. Okay, now I'm at the other end of the pretty little square, for lack of a better term, as you exit out of Del Born, which is down there where that vertical orange post is. I think it's the back of the Iglesia, or church, of Santa Maria. The thing I like about Barcelona, and I think I saw this in Granada, is just one lovely little square after another. Can't see a way in, so I'm guessing it's closed right now. Although I think I may have seen enough churches. And streets like this just invite you to walk down them, don't they? This is pretty just because the hint of secret little pretty places like that balcony up there. And the people who care enough to put plants like this out on their balcony, actually for others to enjoy more than themselves. And after my last comment, a little bit of irony. Here we are, just an interesting little intersection that I've come to. Some narrow streets. Now here's what I like, a narrow street, a cross street that's narrow, and notice how that street curves to the right, just drawing you down there to wonder what's along and beyond that turn. I could have told you it's two old ladies and Maryland. I think it's interesting. Here's a commercial laundry with arches and pillars and vases, and here displayed plates. A little narrow street where people live and hang their laundry out, and yet there are very lovely shops on the bottom floor. Too cool. So just wandering my way back to my hostel, the cathedral not more than a block away across the main street behind me, I saw this down a side street and pursued it. This is the value of serendipitously walking randomly throughout the city on your way home. Look at the detail on the worked stones at the base. Is that original? The bases oftentimes are original, because that's what's left standing after everything's been cannibalized. Here we have a chewed up wall for some reason, and that arch there. The Parc is brick is usually what's been filled in during a restoration. Again, the intriguing thing is to look for the depressions in the wall that suggest prior uses, like those two little square rectangulars, and then notice this horizontal line across here and there. Notice that square rectangular, horizontal rectangular, perhaps to hold some kind of post that came out to turn this into a little shop with an awning or something. Now these holes are pigeon roosts. Who'd have thought when they carved this out that that's what those things would be used for? These were part of original wall and tower. You wonder what these were for. Notice all the way up this wall are horizontal lines of square holes that were probably used for additional flooring. Another narrow street. The pension. You can stay in any environment you want. Part of the building I'm going to pan down is interesting just because of how curious it is. What it probably represents is the remnant of another building or archway or something that came off of that in an earlier time. I think I may have seen this before, either that or something like it, but pretty on this street of palm trees. Another park not too far from my hostel. I have no idea what the purpose of this once was. So here's more underground parking apparently. Back end of an early Romanesque church. Like either this church or the people in this neighborhood have a little garden. I think it may be that church. And that this park surrounds it.